All right, everybody, welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're making pastitsio. We're making the king of all baked dishes. Pastitsio is basically Greek lasagna. It is made with a Bèchamel instead of ricotta cheese and an absolutely delicious meat sauce. We'll go over the ingredients quickly. So we have some extra virgin Greek olive oil. We have some dry red wine. For our spices, we have cinnamon, bay leaves, allspice, clove, and we have fresh nutmeg. If you don't have fresh nutmeg, don't worry about it. You could just buy some ground nutmeg. We have some Greek oregano. This is a must-have. You have to have Greek oregano. We have 1 yellow onion. We have a head of garlic. And this is pastitsio pasta. Like, there's not really a name for it. This is imported from Greece. If you don't have this, don't worry about it. You can find it at international stores. But if you don't, you can use bucatini, you can use ziti. Those will both work really well. We have some tomato paste, whole San Marzano tomatoes, 2 pounds of lean ground meat. This is meat from Stark, Florida, from a local farmer we buy from. It's grass-fed, grass-finished. Some all-purpose flour, some butter, 6 eggs, some whole milk, and pecorino romano. So traditionally, this cheese, this dish would be made with a cheese from Greece called kefalotyri. Okay, you cannot really find that here. You can only find it in some traditional stores. If you don't have it, you could use this. It's a really hard, salty cheese, very similar to it, and it's still gonna be delicious. All right, so now we're gonna start with the meat sauce. Okay, so this dish has 3 parts. We have the pasta, the meat sauce, and the bechamel. We're gonna start by making the meat sauce because that's gonna take the longest. So I'm gonna start out by getting my pan on medium to medium-high heat. I'm gonna let that preheat for a moment, and then I'm gonna add the meat. But while our pan is finishing preheating, I wanna talk about the ingredients we're gonna use here. So we have some 90-10 grass-fed, grass-finished beef. We have an onion, some garlic, our spices, but we're gonna start by browning the meat. So now that my pan is hot, I'm just gonna open this up. Dry pan, no oil, no nothing, right in the pan. Your meat should sizzle right as you put it into the pan. If it doesn't sizzle, the pan's not hot enough. Okay, so now that your meat is nice and spread evenly across the pan, just don't touch it, just let it brown. And this is gonna take the longest out of this whole recipe. All right, so I wanna stop and talk about this. We're halfway done through with browning the meat, and a lot of people would stop right here. They would just take this out of the pan, because you can see all the meat is cooked, but this is steamed meat. You can see all the moisture in the bottom of the pan. This is not browned. This is just steamed. So we're gonna keep going. Don't be afraid. Just keep your pan on medium heat, stir it regularly, and we'll check back in when this is done. All right, so now if you take a look here, we've got our meat nice and brown. You can see all these nice charred little bits. So I know you guys are saying, oh, well, it looks dry. And that would be true if you're making something like taco meat, but we're gonna add tomatoes and we're gonna add moisture into this later. So now this is looking good. We're just gonna turn the heat down a little bit, and we're gonna add 1 full diced yellow onion. All right, so now that we got our onions in the pan with our nice and brown meat, we're just gonna mix this around and let them steam a little bit before we add the garlic. If you don't have a garlic press, you can dice this up on your cutting board. If you don't have fresh garlic, you could just use some garlic powder. But I'm gonna add just a little bit of olive oil, just a drizzle. This will just help the onions break down. All right, now that the onions and the meat have softened, this smells absolutely amazing, you guys. I wish you guys could smell this. We're gonna add some tomato paste. About 2 tablespoons. I'm gonna mix that in. It's just gonna help thicken the sauce and help bring some richness, some darker color as well. Okay, so now this is all nice and brown and crispy. I'm gonna turn up the heat on my pan, really, really hot, and I'm gonna add about half a cup of dry red wine. This is just some San Sebastian. Maybe a cup. All right, once that's starting to cook down, we can turn our heat back down. We don't wanna burn this or take this any darker than it already is. But look at that beautiful color, you guys. Just look at that. All right, so now that our sauce is nice and cooked and our wine is reduced, we're gonna add our peeled whole San Marzano tomatoes, just right in the middle. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of water from the sink straight into this, just to get a little bit more out, as well as some water for the sauce. We're just gonna break this up. If you don't wanna use whole San Marzano tomatoes, you don't have to. You could just use tomato puree like I did in my spaghetti and meatballs. Okay, so off camera I added about another cup of water just to help thin this out, because I am gonna simmer this on the stove for about an hour and I don't want it to get too thick. So we're gonna add our spices now. So I'm gonna start out with 2 or 3 bay leaves, depends on how much you like. Bay leaves are absolutely delicious. They're a staple in Greek cooking. Okay. We're gonna add about a teaspoon of clove. So I couldn't find whole clove, but I found some ground clove. This will work just fine. We're gonna add a nice healthy pinch of this Greek oregano. We're gonna add some salt. We're not gonna over salt it right now, just a little bit, because we're gonna test it later and add accordingly. We're gonna add some cinnamon, another very, very popular spice in Greek cooking. And I have whole allspice that I'm just gonna go ahead and put maybe 2 or 3 in my mortar and pestle. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and add our allspice. Last but not least, we're gonna add some fresh black pepper. And optionally, you can add some fresh nutmeg, which I'm gonna actually go ahead and do. All right, so now all our spices in, we're just gonna mix. You can see it's nice and watery, and that's fine. We want that. We don't want it to be too thick because we're gonna simmer this for at least an hour or until it's our desired consistency. All right, so now we're gonna move on to the bechamel sauce. So I'm gonna have all the measurements down in the description, but what a bechamel sauce essentially is a French cream custard sauce. It's very important to not burn this. This is a little complicated, but don't worry, I'm gonna walk you through it. So we're gonna start up our stove on low heat, nice and low. We don't wanna burn this. We're gonna add equal parts butter to flour, but before we add our flour, we're gonna wait for our butter to just go ahead and melt. All right, so our butter is nice and melted. Now we're gonna add our equal part of flour. This is just all-purpose flour. All the measurements are gonna be down in the description. So we're gonna turn up our heat just a little bit more here, okay? And we're gonna go ahead and mix this all together until it clumps up. It's gonna clump up, that's fine. Just don't let any stick to the bottom or the sides. You gotta be diligent with this part, but I promise you, after this part's done, it's smooth sailing from here. All right, so now this is all equally incorporated. We're just gonna keep mixing until it's all cooked just a little bit, because we just wanna cook that flour taste out. But right now, just be very careful that if you stop mixing this, it will burn and it's gonna be complete trash. All right, so now this is cooked down just a little bit. We're gonna completely cut the heat. I've completely turned my stove off. We're gonna just take this off because I don't want any more heat to happen. And we're just gonna add a splash of milk. Then with our whisk, we're just gonna go ahead and gently incorporate all this. We don't want any clumps. If some gets stuck to the sides like it is here, you can just use your tool, just scrape this down from the sides, from the bottom. But you can see here, there's not very many clumps. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and put this back on the stove. And just make sure there's no clumps. You can see there's some clumps on the bottom here. Make sure there's no big clumps. All right, now we're gonna turn our heat back on, straight back to low. And we're gonna add our milk back in while mixing. So as you can see here, there's no clumps in here. There should be nothing stuck to the bottom. So just go ahead with your spoon. Make sure there's nothing on the sides. Make sure there's nothing on the bottom. And we're just gonna turn up our heat to medium low. All right, while this gets a little bit hotter, we're gonna go ahead and start grating our cheese directly into our bechamel. All right, so this has been simmering on low heat for a good bit now, and you can see how much this is starting to thicken. So I'm gonna go ahead and really make sure that the heat's down nice and low. I'm just trying to keep this warm. I don't wanna thicken this any more than it already is. I'm actually gonna go ahead and turn the heat all the way off because I'm gonna have to separate some egg yolks. What I like to do is I just like to crack a whole egg into a bowl. Quick little trick I wanna show you guys how to crack an egg with one hand. You're just gonna grab it with your 3 fingers like this. Just like that. So you're just gonna spread your fingers like that. You're more likely to screw up the yolk like that, but it's a cool party trick. This is a very messy dish to make, but trust me, it's worth it in the end. So what I like to do is I just like to pull out the yolk like this by hand. We don't want any whites in our pasticcio. All right, you can see our bechamel has gotten nice and thick now. We're gonna go ahead and add our egg yolks. And we're gonna do it with a technique called tempering. So we're gonna go ahead with our 6 egg yolks, and we're gonna add in some nice warm bechamel, just like this. So the reason I'm doing this is because if I were to just add the egg yolks straight into there, they would cook and curdle, and I do not want that. So we're just gonna go ahead and mix these up. We're gonna add them straight back into our bechamel while stirring on low heat. And at this point, you can really start to see how thick and creamy this is without even adding any cheese. All right, right now, we're really coming to the end of this, and we really gotta make sure this does not burn or clump up too much. I'm actually gonna go ahead and cut the heat now that the cheese is in. There should be enough residual heat to help it melt. I like that nice yellow hue that you get from the egg yolks. I think it looks really pretty. All right, that is perfect. That is plenty thick. Go ahead and taste it. It's absolutely fantastic. All right, we're gonna go ahead and put this on the stove over here. That's on standby. Now we're just gonna go ahead and boil our pasta and assemble. All right, so now all of our stuff is done. I boiled the pasta in salted water. Our bechamel's done and our meat sauce is done simmering. As you can see here, it's gotten a lot thicker and that's exactly what you want. I also removed the bay leaves. We're gonna go ahead and assemble. First things first, we're gonna add our pasticcio pasta. If you don't have this pasta, like I said earlier, you could just use bucatini or ziti. So I saved the egg whites that we used earlier. This is only 2 egg whites, but we're gonna add them straight into the pasta. This is gonna help hold it together. And we're also gonna add a good amount of sauce straight into the pasta. So go ahead and mix this all around. Just make sure there's no clumps of meat or anything anywhere. Make sure the pasta is nice and even. All right, now that we got our pasta mixed with the meat sauce and the egg white, we're gonna just go ahead with some more cheese right on top. Then we're gonna go straight in with our meat sauce. Right over top, the whole thing. We're just gonna spread this out nice and evenly, all the way to the corners. All right, and now, last but not least, we're gonna go ahead and add our bechamel right on top. Off camera, I added some nutmeg and some cinnamon into this. That's totally optional. I just really like those 2 things. Really go ahead and scrape out all of this. You don't want to leave any of that in your pan. Now we're just going to go ahead and evenly spread this. All right, now that we got our bechamel nice and evenly spread, once again, we're just going to finish this off with quite a bit of Parmesan Reggiano. Don't be stingy with this. This is going to allow for some really nice browning on top and some beautiful color and crust. All right, now that we are fully assembled, we're going to add it into our oven at 375 on the second rack from the top. All right, we're gonna go ahead and let this bake for 35 to 45-ish minutes, and I'll see you when this is done. All right, so our pasticcio has been baking in the oven for roughly 45 minutes. I turned the broiler on at the very end to give it this nice color. It's super important to let it rest. So it's been resting for at least 30 minutes. We're gonna go ahead and cut into this. All right, everything's finally cut up. Let's go ahead and take it out. Looks absolutely delicious to me. And there you have it. That's how I like to make homemade pasticcio. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and try this. I am so excited for this. There's just nothing better than this. It's just so unique. All the flavors complement each other so well. This is absolutely delicious. I think it is absolutely worth all the effort, all the dirty dishes, the long process. If you're gonna make anything Greek, I think you should go ahead and make this. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys really enjoyed this recipe. I hope you guys try this. Thank you guys so much for all the support on my first video, and continue to let me know if there's anything that you would like to see me make in the future. Thank you guys.